And when I would tell people this, some people look at me like I'm baffling them, like it's craziness. And I'm like, no, like you could have a newborn baby picture and that to somebody is going to get somebody off.
And I've heard stories of an advocate talking about like umbilical cords still attached.
Yes.
People.
Yeah.
Like, there are some sick fucks out there.
Yes,
everywhere.
there are. Yeah. Like, and the thing is like, that's real. And I don't think enough people understand that that's the level at what it goes is our precious newborn innocent children.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I have a special guest who has been with us before, and I absolutely love it when she comes on to the show. She always has a ton of awesome information. She's my stats girl. If I need some stats, she's my go-to. So I have Kristin back with us today. So excited. How have you been? It's been a while.
Hey, I am well. I am here and coming to you today to talk about human trafficking and human sex trafficking and tell you a little bit about my own personal experience as a survivor and then throw out some information and education for you on that. That's
Perfect. Yes. Hashtag goals.
right.
So why don't we go through and for those who haven't seen our previous shows, give a brief rundown of, who you are, what you do, and all that fun jazz.
Okay. Yeah. So going over just a little bit about my past, I kind of did my credential thing, So I have a bachelor's of science in general studies. I studied exercise physiology and healthcare management. I am a survivor of domestic abuse and violence, as well as human sex trafficking. In my trauma recovery, I've done education courses in domestic abuse and violence, as well as human trafficking. I also worked alongside did some training, self-defense classes with some local police departments. Also did some jujitsu in that. And did a lot of work in the volunteer work in the child advocacy center. That's where I focused on a lot of like darkness into light, child abuse training, anti-child abuse training, anti-child trafficking training. And just over the years in my trauma recovery, have focused on becoming an advocate myself and doing a lot of volunteer work in the advocate world out there as I work on transitioning my life from, victim to survivor to becoming an advocate myself. And just a little bit about my professional life. I over 15 years of management and business experience professionally. And then just once again, a domestic abuse and violence survivor, as well as human sex trafficking survivor. The previous shows we did, I went in a little bit about my experience as a domestic abuse and violence survivor. I had an abuser who was in a position of power. So I talked about experiences of being put into jail and trying to go against a very, very hard system and structure and a very broken system and structure, and kind of turning a very negative experience into a positive, looking at, like Danielle said, the statistics and the facts out there. Because when you really look at domestic abuse and violence, it's really a problem nationwide that we really need more education and awareness on, and just talking about it, just being able to sit down and have a conversation without it being a stigma to society.
Absolutely. And there are so many stigmas that surround these issues. And it's a shame because they're some of the most horrifying issues that as a society we have happening. And it's to the point where, up until the last decade, most people thought it was a myth or a third world country problem. And the statistics are out and we are number one.
Yeah.
So, it puts things into a whole different ballpark when you really learn and take the time to do the research to see what's happening. And then to further research and see just how little we are doing as a society to help these issues. And then to even further that, the resources that are available for these victims once they get safe.
Yeah. It's it's really interesting. It's really complex, and it's really I after I did the last two podcasts and I had some people watch the podcast and then give me some feedback. One of the biggest words to describe the feedback was disturbing, because we talked about DCFS, we talked about CPS, we talked about the numbers there, and we talked about just overall the brokenness in the system and the lack of just societal awareness about how big the problem is and how protective parents who go into this court system trying to fight for their rights as a protective parent and their rights for their children who are innocent victims in all of this really kind of get steamrolled and just barreled over in these court systems at times. And the biggest word I heard was just disturb and disturbing. And it really, really is when you look at it and the spectrum of things. There are some things going on out there that have good resources and good things going on. But overall, we have got to be on the bandwagon for talking about it more, educating people on it more, and not being afraid to just have that conversation and speak up and speak out. Because, that's one of the number one things with abusers that you find. And this is, today I want to talk about trafficking because I hadn't even realized at a point that I was being trafficked myself. And so we're going to talk about trafficking today and some of the hidden signs and symptoms of that. But that's one of the things that, abusers have alongside with traffickers is silence. They thrive off of silence. And that's one of the biggest killers is silence. And so the more we stay silent and the more we brush it under the rug or we don't talk about this stuff or we just keep going on like it's not happening, that's killing people and it's killing children.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so vital that we talk about this and that we get it out there and that we put programs into place and that we put community, actions into place that really start making everybody overall more proactive instead of reactive.
Absolutely.
So, with that being said, I did want to kind of start with some definitions just so you know how I am. I'm kind of like, all right, let's make sure we define this.
Knowledge is power, my friend. Knowledge is power. Let's go with it.
All right, if that's okay with you.
Rules in session. It's time to learn, folks.
All right. Okay. So first, I kind of want to define the difference between human sex trafficking, human trafficking, and human smuggling. I kind of, just to tell you where I am personally, I kind of do a lot where I'm researching, and kind of looking at things. And then I kind of take a back look and I like to sit and talk to people about it and see what's going on. I will kind of catch up from something with one of the last podcasts. At a point, I had connected with some victims and survivors who, outside of confidential walls had given permission for me to speak with them. And we talked about things, whether we were at a park or at a restaurant or just hanging out about things going on in our lives that we witnessed, whether it was in the court system or, within the domestic abuse and violence shelter. We talked about situations that were going on that, were not in confidential areas. And I had permission to bring this issue up in hopes that maybe an investigator would be interested and look into this because it affected the lives of our children and our well-being. And since then, an investigator got interested, but then everybody was silenced. It honestly made me, disappointed. And it kind of made me retract a little bit and do some self-reflecting because I was like, okay, what can I do? What can we really do at this point? Because I want to be an advocate and I want to keep advocating. This is people's lives that are at stake in these situations. Whether it's trafficking or whether it's domestic abuse and violence, it's always about saving lives. There's always, for the most part, in every case that I've looked at, there's children involved,
Yes.
And so it's, I really had to take some time and just kind of sit back So then I just kind of sit back and I just kind of look at everything. And then I just kind of look at, all right, what have I been doing? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? And so I've kind of taken a break from like the researching and being a part of like a lot of like overall big activities. Plus, there's been some life changes going on. But I've been processing too. One of the things is, I did a lot of trauma work on my domestic abuse and violence and surviving that. And then looking at, some of the issues within the system and the court case that I was having to go through and just the brokenness there and all of that. And never really actually grasping the fact that among all of that, I was actually a victim of human sex trafficking myself. And then starting to process that in my own trauma recovery and therapy. And so here I am going through these classes and going through these trainings and these certifications and learning about trafficking and learning about this. And then I'm putting these pieces together and I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is actually what happened to me. This is actually what happened to me. And then having this kind of light go off, like, oh, wow, this is not okay. Like this is what happened to me. And so, there's no official investigation. There's no official court case. From processing it with professionals that I've just worked with, like my therapist in a sense, and then being able to speak, I guess, what's the word? Uncandidly or not professionally with investigators. Like I've spoken with investigators in the previous state I lived in that worked in, whether it's the domestic abuse and violence area, in the task force, in the police area, and, other attorneys. So speaking with professionals that have worked in the area and then working on my own processing of trauma, come to the realization of things that I went through and that what are seen and what's basically a common denominator in those areas when they're dealing with the trafficked victims and what's going on. So I did want to start with some definitions, and that's just kind of where I'm at, is kind of just, basically to tell my story of this and kind of put it together, what happened to me and why I want to talk about what it is and what's going on, because it's everywhere, like you were saying earlier, this isn't some third world country problem. Like it's literally going on down the street and around the corner. It's everywhere. And we don't want to live in fear of like, oh, we need to be afraid of everything, but we need to be a society of vigilance and awareness, because it is every day these criminals are just getting, and it's not that they're these smart genius people. It's they have these personalities, these psychopath and these sociopathic personalities, and it's a game to them, and they're master manipulators. And so every day they are like becoming a step ahead of us in criminal tactics and these abilities to overplay and override parts of our system, and therefore gaining more and more victims.
Well, and it's all, children and the vulnerable that they're targeting and going after.
Target.
The ones that we're supposed to be most protective of. I mean, not only by societal standards, but by biblical standards. I mean, that's just kind of as a society, we really need to step up our game and get our shit together too.
Yeah.
And part of that is, it's generational. And for a very long time, it was, a mind your own damn business generation. Yeah. And that is not what this is anymore. This is a see something, say something. Yeah. Like silence is literally killing young, innocent people, whether it's children or young men and women that are pulled into this. It's time for change. We have to. And it's up to us as we, the people, as these societies, not just in the United States, but worldwide. But I mean, obviously, our current focus is, the United States, and, it's time to create change.
Yeah, big time, big time. I agree. And with that was one of the things I was going to start with, is the targeting and the vulnerable groups after going over the definitions. But let me go over some sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, the harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act is under the age of 18. And I will say this, In any state, a child under the age of 18, so a minor, a child 15 to 18 and under, children, and I know in previously Louisiana, a law was passed that children cannot give consent. Like it's just flat out across the courts, children and minors cannot give consent. So you're going to be charged as a trafficker and you're going to be charged as a child, basically pedophile, I think under the books is what that is saying. But anybody under the age of 18 cannot give consent if it's going to be looked at in trafficking. Human trafficking, the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people in order to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of forced labor. Human smuggling, organized, irregular movement of people across borders on a payment or service basis. And usually there's fraudulent documents involved. A lot of those three things that they have common thing is force, coercion, manipulation, and fraud. One of the first things you want to kind of look at is the grooming stages. And the very first part of the grooming stages and grooming, I'll go over what grooming is. Grooming is a deliberate process by which offenders gradually groom or manipulate a child or a victim by setting up opportunities for abuse through gradual boundary violations and by gaining the trust of the child or victim and those closest to them before sexual abuse or any kind of form of abuse happens. The targeting. The targeting starts to happen, and this is where they go into the vulnerable victim. Someone was asking me this the other day. They're like, well, I don't understand this targeting, or what do you mean to go after these vulnerable people? And someone who's in it all the time, like I talk about the stuff all the time, so that's an easy thing for me. But it made me kind of realize someone who's not in this all the time and not talking about it all the time isn't going to realize. So I use something as simple as, walking in the mall and seeing, a purse on sale. A certain person is going to attempt trying to get that purse in the window. And, that's how I kind of grasp that with someone who has never really understood human trafficking or sex trafficking. But for this podcast, I wanted to kind of do the grooming stages and targeting. So when they're targeting people, it's honestly really kind of like when someone is hunting or when you're going after something and you are putting a bullseye on something, you are going, that's what I want, that right there. And you are going to take your arrow, your bullet, your whatever you have, and you're going to that's your focus. That's what you're going to go after. This is what you have to have. And how do they decide that? What is vulnerable? What does vulnerable look like? Vulnerable victims to these perpetrators are usually foster children, welfare system children, minors, teens, adults who grew up in it, adults who had sex trauma, sexual abuse history, undocumented minors, illegal immigrants seeking asylum, teen runaways, child runaways, homeless people, shelters, homeless shelters, domestic abuse and violence shelters. In my personal story, I was sex trafficked out of a domestic abuse and violence shelter. And domestic abuse and violent victims. So these perpetrators look for a weakness. They want to target the grooming stage. They target the child, the teen, the victim. All right. They gain the child, the teen, the victim's caregiver's trust. So like in my story, my example, they targeted me, correct? They want to fill a need. So I was at the shelter. I had nowhere to go. And now when you really look at the fullness of my story, there were probably people inside the shelter connected to whatever group overall was trafficking people and profiting from this. So it was an interconnected thing. They see a weakness. So I have nowhere to live. I have no money. So I am vulnerable. I need sleep. I need housing. I need money. So they target you. That's a weak person right there. We can use her. She has needs. So they gain my trust. This couple came to me at a very low time and they're like, we're going to offer you a place to live. We're going to offer to pay for, your legal problems. We're going to help you drive places. They feel needs for you. They feel needs for you. And along this, sometimes at first they'll act like there's no strings attached or there's no problem with it. It's almost like what you see in a domestic abuse and violence relationship, that love bombing phase, where it's almost like it's too good to be true, is what they say, where there's this overwhelming feeling of like, wow, like this is a wonderful feeling. They're giving me so much love. They're showing me how much they appreciate just my presence, but it comes at a cost eventually is what happens. And so once they start to fill that need, so I needed housing, I needed food, I needed money. They start to isolate the child, the teen, or the victim. And so, like in my case, the couple that was grooming me for sex trafficking started to pull me away and to play games with me, as in telling me things like I needed to sleep with my attorney. I needed to act this way. I didn't need to talk to my mom. And on the side was having conversations with my abuser. They were talking to the man who tried to kill me on the phone in front of me. So they play these mind games with you, and that's where it starts to come at a cost, where they're showing you basically this pretty flower bouquet, and it's pretty color, all beautiful on one side. And then in the next minute, they turn it around and it's dead flowers on the other. But you have nowhere to go and you have no other option. And they know this. And in my case, what I went through is they were playing these games with me, these mind games, so that I was only theirs. So I was going to be looked down on in the court system. I wasn't going to have proper legal representation at one point. I didn't know who to trust because they were playing games with both myself and my abuser, as well as, another party, my mom in the case. And then they would say stuff to me like, oh, we're going to move and you're going to move with us. You're going to live with us and you're going to be with us. Almost like I was their property. And I was going to be their property. And then in the grooming stages, they sexualize the relationship. They start to sexualize the relationship. And here it can be little things. And I want to say this disclaimer because people who don't know will say things that they don't realize, like, well, you didn't know that was normal. Like when I tell people, oh, yeah, they kept telling me I needed to sleep with my attorney. Sometimes people will be like, you didn't think that wasn't normal? Like nobody just sleeps with their attorney, Not anybody in a healthy coping way, Some people do. What is it called? I know there's corruption and dirtiness and people sleep with people and there's this stuff, right? But they were like, oh no, you need to sleep with your attorney. Like you need to do this. You need to get on these dating sites and you need to go out with these men and you need to sleep with them. It's like they were pushing me out to sell me for sex, and they'd show me pictures of older men and they would be like, this man has this cabana, like a 90-year-old man. And here I am in my 30s, like I want nothing to do with this man. But they were like, oh, he's older. He has his money. You could just go to his house for a little while and just spend some time with him, like trying to sell me out to men for dates. And I want to say this disclaimer. So being a sex trauma survivor, I know myself and what I have learned in trauma recovery is that we do, as sex trauma survivors, have a hard time sometimes when we're coming out of recovery from sex trauma, recognizing what is safe and what is not safe in sex, and what is okay and what is not okay in sex. So when someone is telling me, when I have just come out of a situation where I have been raped and where I've been continuously raped and gone through sexual assault, I don't know certain touches and certain sayings and certain maneuvers by somebody is inappropriate because that's all I've known. So that's the norm for me. So that's why I'm also a vulnerable victim for these perpetrators, is because I am easy to influence into the sex trade industry. And so they'll start to sexualize the relationship. It may be small things. I can remember coming in from working out and the husband of the couple coming behind me and hugging me, and I'm sweaty working out, hugging me and then kissing me from behind, going, "Oh, I just love when you're so sweaty like that." And I remember freezing and in my mind going, I don't know if this is normal or not, having one of those moments. And it's not normal. It wasn't normal. That was crossing a boundary. And that's a part of what they do in the grooming. They start to cross those boundaries and they start to move as closer and closer and closer as they can to breaking your boundaries down to start manipulating you.
Well, I mean, these people that have worked so hard to get your trust, you
Yeah.
trust them, and they're making it out to be completely normal and completely fine. It's
Like
part of the
this couple at one
manipulation
yeah,
process.
this couple at one point, like, I felt like they could be my adoptive parents. Like, that's how close they made me feel to like I was their daughter and I needed them. They were really helping me with things. And in the long run, they were really destroying a lot of things. Like, they played an intricate part in the destruction of my court case. They played an intricate part in the destruction of, some relationships. That's the isolation. That's part of the isolation and being a detriment in relationships. Some of the supports I had or maintained, kind of being a destruction piece in there where they had me to themselves and I was going to be just theirs. As I break down all right, this is where they're starting to sexualize this. They would say things about their sex life and then leave the next day. Like, for instance, they would talk about how when they have sex, one of their most favorite things to do is use whipped cream and something else, right? And then the next day I'd go into their house after working and they'd have the whipped cream on the counter and then they'd be in the bedroom. So then it goes into gestures of we're going to show you this and we're going to want you to do this. So it's very interesting because some people might not understand. Like, I had briefly talked to you about, like, I was looking at this one girl who is fighting human sex trafficking, and my concern with her is she keeps saying, oh, if you have to have sex with them coming and going, it's human sex trafficking, human sex trafficking. Yes, like in instances, if you are having to have sex with somebody to come and go, that is sex trafficking. But it's not always just sex. It's sex acts and it's the leading up to, it's the grooming, it's the manipulation, it's the coercion, And I'll get into that. I'll get into some more examples of things that I learned about or was educated on or even talked to about from other victims that went through it themselves. But then they start sexualizing the relationship among the grooming stages, and that'll get further and further. There would be parts where they can do things where they start voyeurism, where they're putting cameras in on you or they're telling you to do certain things, act a certain way, whether they're telling you put lingerie on and be sexual. And that's a part of the trafficking, the human sex trafficking is there will be traffickers out there who will take pictures of their victims or the children, and they will sell those pictures, but they won't give the victim the money. That is sex trafficking, and that is a sex act. That's where we have to educate and help people understand where there needs to be more voice and more education and awareness so that they're understanding what's going on, because that's exploitation as well. And that's what we're seeing too with the children. And it's interesting. I brought this up when I was talking to a police officer about some of his investigations that he had done and like what they see in this area in particular overall is that, when they look at some of the cases where it was like teenage boys, the sextortion is a big one in these cases. So where I used to live in Louisiana, gangs were a big problem and gangs were like a heavy presence in places. And so, a part of gang environment is trafficking. When it comes to teenage boys, one thing that happen is, they get this embarrassment with the sextortion because especially with the online and these technical things everybody can do these days, someone will send them a a picture of breast, right? And they're like, oh, I sent you my breast. Send me a picture of your penis. And then they'll start to do that wager that, oh, well, I'm going to, unless you give me $250, I'm going to send this to everybody you know. And that has been shown over time that the mental health of the boys, it's for some reason on the level, it's really affecting the younger male generation more so than anything. And they're really starting to look at that. And they're really starting to say, like, okay, what can we do to intervene? What can we do to some early intervention, some education and awareness? And that's one of the things with not staying silent that I think is really important to talk about. I kind of went on a tangent there, went on from one thing to the other, but I found that because I went through a lot of the sexualizing of that relationship with that couple. And so I just feel like I can really feel for a lot of the things that you see from where I was, it's the familiar or the gang trafficking that happens. And the sex trafficking and the human trafficking, it's familial and gang. And they say that it's like block gang. So it's not specifically like, oh, this big, like it's the cartel over this, or it's, your big mafia or your mob, but it's extensions breaking down and it's like block game. So like your pimps and your prostitutes, and they're breaking down and they're kind of coming into the cities or on the outskirts of the cities. And what they're doing is they're trying to basically bring up their own, like have their gang, and they're going to start their own gang, or they're going to move the gang further into something. And they rent out hotel rooms and they have their victims in hotel rooms. They rent the rooms out to people. I know myself, I was put in a hotel room. It's an interesting method and tactic that's going on, but that's one thing that they see. And I was in the South Louisiana area. Some of the familial things that was really hard I guess I can go into some examples, the easy ways that they kind of get into the younger generation and what's going on, because the gangs really kind of go after the younger generation. And we're talking about like the minor getting into the junior high and the high schoolers is through the internet, whether it's the Roblox or the Snapchat, all of the other platforms, whether I don't know if people really use the Facebook anymore, all that. But I heard a lot about Snapchat and Roblox. I had a conversation with some high schoolers tell me about how they had a drug dealer get in touch with them through Snapchat. And the drug dealer contacted them through Snapchat. They met the drug dealer on the street through Snapchat. And the drug dealer told them how they were able, the drug dealer themselves, this is the drug dealer, okay, meeting these teenagers on the street. The drug dealer, through Snapchat, was able to pull 10 people from their contact list on their social media platform. So then that drug dealer can now go after and contact more of their contacts. I was like, okay, all right. So there is always a network of networking for these criminals. And this is why we have to, we as parents and we as people and we as a community and a society have to just be advocates, basically, and speak about it and just be, very open and honest with our kids, our neighbors, and everybody. And talking, and like you said, when you see something, say something, just like the national billboard says.
Well, awareness is key. I mean, especially when it comes to, the kids. Kids have no idea. They have no clue what to look for. They have no idea that they're being groomed. I mean, you think these groomers are hopping on these online chat rooms saying, hey, I'm a 55-year-old guy. You know what I mean? Like, they're pretending to be somebody else. They are pretending to be friends, and a lot of times the same age. And a grown man could be pretending to be a young little girl. And your average everyday child is not going to think anything of that. Nothing. Yeah. Not only are they not going to think anything of it, they're going to think they have a new bestie that they're going to share all their personal information with, including their phone number and their address and anything else that they would share with any average everyday friend that they have.
Yes, they're going to talk to them just like they talk to their best friend. And that's why it's so key. Like when you're dealing with your children and your adolescents about online stuff, is to, as much as they get annoyed with you, is to keep repeating, like, do not share personal information online with people, like even in these games, Roblox or what else they have. I don't know, Johnny's World or whatever. I don't know if y'all have that where you are, or I
I
hear
don't think I've heard
everything.
of that one yet.
But they have these chat or these message boards, and it's like, no, you don't say anything. Don't say anything, no matter what somebody's asking or no matter what somebody's saying, you don't share your personal information because you don't really know who's behind that name or that word up there. Or if anything, with parental controls, just don't allow the messaging or the chat boxes or the avatars because you don't know who's behind there. And there's so many examples of this. Before you know it, somebody is sending, basically what happens is that a nude picture, and then they're challenged to send a nude picture back, and then that nude picture's captured, and then it's held basically a ransom. And then the teenager is too embarrassed to tell their parents or to tell a friend, and something really awful happens. And then that's where we have to be better with our children and better as parents in the community is just talking about things and just being open with communication so that when our children or when our neighbors or when our children's children or friends get into those situations, they're not afraid to come talk to somebody or they know who people on their safety team is. Like I like to talk to my kids and friends about a safety team, picking people in your life that you know are safe to talk to, whether it's a teacher or a doctor or your mom or a coach, someone you know that no matter what, you can go to about any and everything and just tell them about it. And I think that's key in a lot of things is talking about a safety team and going over things. There's also the money schemes. And this is one that I heard about with human sex trafficking as well as prostitution, because I did hear also when I was doing some of my trainings and certifications that prostitution online they're trying that out more and that's going up more. And so we have to understand, and this is going to go back to the Sex Act with human sex trafficking, not all prostitutes are being sex trafficked. Some are choosing that as their way of living, and that is their choice. Now, some prostitutes are being trafficked, and there's a differentiation. And I will say one study showed that it is taking them, because it's hard. Even now, when I go over some things, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe these people did this to me. But on average, in domestic abuse and violence cases, it takes the victim 5 to 7 attempts to leave their abuser. And they're seeing the same thing in human sex trafficking or human trafficking cases. It is taking 7 or more attempts to actually have a victim understand and see that they're being trafficked. Because these manipulators, these traffickers, they're so good they don't realize they're being trafficked. They don't realize
it's similar logistics as to what it is with domestic violence.
Yes.
It's 2 specific abuses might be different, but it's abuse nonetheless, either which way you look at it. And you've got the grooming / love bombing and all of the things. It's pretty similar, if not nearly exact in the way that the process is worked by these dangerous people.
Yeah. Some of the examples that I'll tell you about that I've learned about that have been going on is you will see things. So there has been an increase over the years online, like I was talking about the Snapchat and the Roblox and all of that. So all of your online platforms, these criminals have found a way basically to get in and to do some type of drug trafficking or sex trafficking. And so in the sex trafficking world, we have seen prostitutes prostitute more. I talked to a man actually who went out to meet like a woman, and upon meeting the woman, she demanded like, okay, we're not doing anything further on this date until you give me $500. So there is something as point blank as that, as you're going to see this woman online, try to make a date with a woman or man online, and they're going to meet you in person and they're going to demand money from you. There is that scheme. Then there is the scheme that is being seen. And this is a part of the human sex trafficking. It can be prostituting or it can be sex trafficking. There's 2 ways to go about it. And here's the differences with it. So seeing that women or men will get on these dating apps and they will talk to men. Let's say they're talking to 5 or 7 men a day on these dating apps, and they're convincing these men they're going to come and they want to meet them out on a date, but they don't have a car or they don't have gas. So they need gas money or they need an Uber. So they're going to get this person who's going to go out on a date with them to send them to Cash App or Venmo or whatever those sites are. Let's say 10 or 20 bucks. Okay. You send me 20 bucks for gas. I'm going to come meet you at the IHOP. Okay. But the thing is they never show up. They're scheming them for money. So they're talking to 5 or 7 guys a day, or men or women a day. I mean, they can make anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a week doing this. And the difference is that is prostitution is the women or the men are getting it the money themselves and making the money themselves. The human sex trafficking is somebody else, the trafficker is getting the money, and the person doing it is not actually getting the money themselves. So you're seeing things like that. Other things to look out for with it. Let me see if I want to go back to the grooming. Yeah, a sex act. Any sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by a person. So it can be anything of like jewelry, gift certificates. And that's one thing that you have to look at is some things I highlighted, like what to look out for is if you see somebody, and this is where you have to be careful when you're trying to advocate for, or if you're like on a task force, or if you're working to try to save or help possible victims, what you're looking for, and like maybe the teenagers especially, is, their appearance. Because sometimes they can look like they're, very destitute, or their appearance looks off. Like sometimes they might be wearing, their clothing looks off. Like maybe they don't have the best hygiene, but yet they have like a name brand purse or very, very flashy nails or jewelry going on. And they seem to pay with all these gift cards, and they can't really tell you how they're working or what they're working. It's questionable things that you can make a conversation on and see what's going on. But different things that they say you can look out for is, this is it, the luxury items such as manicures, designer products, and purses. They tend to still, even when you're looking at the differences of prostitutes and human sex trafficking, they'll still use the same language as like, pimps and daddies, like they got a daddy out there, they got a pimp out there. You will see that when they're dealing with the minors, especially. And the familial, that was something that was dealt with a lot where I was previously, besides the gang, was the familial. From what I understood and gathered from it, it was just this generational hand-me-down. And it was like, the family thing, it's what the family did. One of the examples I have was, there was many cultures in South Louisiana. And one of the hardest ones to try to advocate for and to try to help was some of the Spanish families. And in the sense of you may have a family that, the mom and the child work together somewhere. And the way the rent is paid is a man is allowed to come over and sleep with that child a few nights a week, and that's paying the rent. That is a form of trafficking. It's human sex trafficking. And that's a part of the familial trafficking that's going on there and in other places as well. So it's like there's so many examples of it and so many things. Even an example of, if you are in an agreement with somebody that, okay, they're going to put you on their payroll and they're going to pay you minimum wage, like you're going to be making $7.50 an hour, but you owe them a debt or something. And they put in there, oh, but you're not going to get your tips. And at the end of your shift, this person you're going to have to give them fellatio for this amount of time, and it's going to equal that. That's human sex trafficking. So it's different things like that I think people are uncomfortable to talk about, and they don't think it's happening down the street. And unfortunately, it is in a lot of places. And we have to be more vigilant in helping people understand what it is and how to label it properly, how to approach it and communicate about it. And like you said, if you see something, say something, because we are in the business of saving lives. And there are so many children that being involved in these things, and a lot of them don't even realize it. They think it's absolutely normal, or it's the way that their lives have to be. And that's not the truth. I can go into a little more about like what to look out for besides like the vulnerable victims, but luxury items such as manicures, designer products, and purses that are obtained without an expandable source of income, not allowed in public alone or to speak for themselves. That's a big one. Sometimes you'll see that they'll be walking with with usually an older man or an older woman. Small children, that's the familiar that you see sometimes, is all the family's a part of the business. Sometimes you do have to look at that, like what's really going on, because that can be a part of human trafficking and the familial trafficking, untreated STDs, tattoos, branding on the neck or the lower back. That's a big one when it comes to like the gangs and the trafficking, and branding by sometimes like the pimps, and almost like a territory thing with it. Anything from like even coloring the hair. We would see things like butterflies, dotted tattoos, red hair. It can mean a specific, I belong to this, or I'm a part of this. And it can give advocates or agencies an indicator of this is a victim of this gang affiliation, or this, okay, there is a trafficking circle here. This is where we maybe need to start or look into. Poor physical dental health, that's where you want to look. You don't want to profile in a sense and say everybody with a Gucci purse might have a problem. It's kind of putting the thing together of like how I was saying, how something doesn't mix right. Their hygiene's a little off, but they have these very expensive and elaborate things. That's usually, honestly, 7 times out of 10, they have a pimp and something's going on, and and there's gift cards or something's involved, and those are their form of payment, and that's what's going on. And it's especially interesting when there's not if you strike up a conversation with somebody and there's no other like explanation for work or like what they do for work or income. You could start to see the red flags pop up. And so that's where in those situations, you can just be an encouragement and a support and give the resources for maybe somebody who might want to get out of that lifestyle, because it is a very tricky thing, because their lives are also at risk. If they attempt to lead that lifestyle, sometimes they can be killed, even especially if they have a debt or something going on, that can cost them their lives, their children's lives, everything. So it's a very, it's a hard subject to approach, and it's a very tricky subject to approach, but we just got to do it. We've got to do it as people. We've got to, because we have to save lives. And that's what it just comes down to at the end of the day. If they avoid eye contact or a lot of social interaction, and especially authority figures or law enforcement, you'll see a lot of times some of those, especially if they might be sex workers that are a part of the human sex trafficking. They may have had probation or different things like that, or they have warrants out for their arrest. They're not going to want to talk to police officers, or they're not going to want to be around police officers. And so they might be finicky or try to go away. But sometimes they are the key or the source to having some of the best information for those environments, and some of the best contacts for some of those helping us with those victims and finding those perpetrators, seeming to adhere to scripted or rehearsed responses in social interactions. That's something that's very key, I find, is when you're around somebody and they can't really make a conversation on their own, when it sounds like they are taught or coached something. That's a red flag to me that maybe something deeper is going on. When they're constantly repeating the same thing, or they can't really talk to you about anything. Coached conversation is what you want to kind of hear of, or, the repeated information. Or if maybe you ask them a question and they look around before they want to answer you to see if the scene is safe, to see if their environment is safe to talk. Changes in habits, appearance, attitude, refillable gift cards, hotel key cards. A lot of them may be homeless and stay in different areas or places. And then, of course, a lot of them they come from physical abuse, sexual abuse. So there's the common symptoms and signs of someone with trauma and someone walking around with a lot of untreated trauma. So the things to look for, if there's not a coached conversation going on when you're asking questions, look for them talking about ailment, always having a hurt, a chronic illness, something going on. Is there something deeper there? It's things like that, being mindful of. And I felt like I'm going on a tangent. Sorry.
No, you're fine. It's a lot of really helpful information. That's one of the things that makes it so difficult, is because there's no one individual thing that can be pinpointed.
There's not.
And there's so many different aspects and so many different possibilities and so many different scenarios. And you got, these bad guys that they're not stupid. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it makes it really hard to combat and to fight back and to be able to get victims safe. And, like you said, a lot of victims don't even realize that that's what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of situations too where I know from victims that I've spoken with, these bad guys will hold their children over your head. Oh, if you say anything, we're going to make sure you lose your children. Or, oh, well, no, you accepted everything. So you're a prostitute. So if you say anything, you're going to go to jail. And so they play these mind games
Yep.
to where these victims have no clue even what's happening to them, much less what they can do to try to get safe and get help.
Yeah. And that's one thing is making sure that if you feel like you are talking to somebody who might be a victim or who might be being trafficked, is letting them know that they are safe to talk to you, that you have resources, they are safe, and what is said to you, they are in a safe place. Because that's one thing that I found is exactly like what you said, is they're being threatened. I was threatened, and it's so scary and it's so hard. I guess I had to come to the realization at the end of the day, like I was telling somebody, it's like one day I just woke up and I remembered who the F I was, but I also, it's about saving lives. Like I'm gonna save lives. I'm gonna save lives. And this is who I want to be. Like at the end of the day, okay, if I lose my life saving lives, I'm saving lives. I'm saving lives. Like, I don't know. There's just something in me that just burns with this. But that's one thing is if you start seeing those signs, like any victims that I may have come across in my trauma recovery and healing from this and doing volunteer advocate work, is first letting them understand and recognize, like, okay, first, I want to make sure that you understand I'm a safe person for you to talk to. And first, I want, in dealing with a victim not too long ago, I made a statement for her because I just understand how different things can be. Like, okay, they may not be able to communicate with you on their phones. They may not be able to communicate with you face to face. They may not be able to communicate with you even verbally, like that's, I guess, face to face. So it's coming up with, you may have to pass notes, write letters. There's different ways to communicate.
Even nonverbal cues,
Nonverbal cues
signal
and
or
codes. Yeah,
anything.
like we have code language in this world. And that's one thing that you have to kind of communicate or get across. And you can't care what anybody else thinks or what anybody else might judge you for. Because at the end of the day, it's about saving a life. And I would rather say something or do something, what is it, on good faith that, okay, something may have been happening, and this person is going to be okay, than not have said something and something terrible happened. But it's really letting these people know that they are safe, because if their abuser, their trafficker sees one word in a text message or one evidence of they're trying to leave or they're trying to escape, it could be the end of the road for them. So it's a very tricky thing sometimes, trying to help them escape or get them out or just get them to even say something at all. You come up with, and they do have out there a lot of integral things that, we can do to communicate with each other, to get it out there to each other that, all right, I'm a safe person. I can try to help you and get you to the right people to get you out of this life, get you in the safe one. So,
and if it's something that, if you're a viewer and getting involved is something that you're interested in, just do a quick Google search. There are a ton of different places that offer a lot of resources and free training and free classes, or even if it's, a small, a nominal fee, there's all sorts of different programs and such out there. So, I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, most states, I think, have all that child advocacy centers are a good place to start with stuff. They do the trafficking trainings. And then a lot of the agencies, like some of your local police departments, should have some of the trainings out there as well that you can either join or become a part of or look into. But yeah, there should be, out there, just kind of, like you said, Google, and there should be some free trainings, even online. Like I looked up one time, a trucker, they have this really cool network of people who drive 18-wheelers who are anti-human traffickers, like a support system. And they have an online video that does a brief synopsis of how you can be an advocate in an 18-wheeler and fight against the human trafficking out there. So, it's really cool to look at, and I meant to that's one thing I forgot to do as I was prepping my stuff was I meant to put up we can still do that in the end, is put up the
Yeah.
national number and some of the
Yeah. Any
resources.
information that you want to put up, I
Yeah,
can,
okay.
I'll stick links in the description.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be cool because I would love to put like whether it's the Child Advocacy Center, and then there's some of the stuff I got here with like the National Human Trafficking Center, and then of course the Blue Campaign gives you a lot of resources, and the National for Center and Exploited Children. That would be a cool resource for people to look at. Is that the anti-trafficking with the trucking? I thought that was really cool. I watched that and did their training video. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like it is. It's if you do something, say something. But like, they had this one trucker, he did the training and he called 911. He saw a suspicious car because that tends to be, I guess, what I gather from the training is, they'll have, the truckers or be parked in the lot, and they'll have a car come up with ladies usually and pimping them out. Some are prostitutes, some are not, some are there against their will. He said something, and he saved some lives. And so that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I'll send you some of the resources, but I didn't get that.
Perfect.
I was so excited. Just talk to you again. Yay. Anything else I wanted to go over? Yeah, like the examples of the groping, hugging, kissing, anytime they're wanting to trade something, client's house, even someone like telling you to go clean somebody's house and you're going to clean their house, with maybe a bikini on and they don't pay you, but someone's sitting there watching you. If someone else is getting that payment, that is a form of human sex trafficking. So it's any of those like sex acts. So I think sometimes what happens is people hear these sex acts and they think of like being in a strip club right away. And it's like, no, like it can be something like we have to understand people that there's so many things that you can look at. And even when I talk about, I know it's probably hard for people to hear, but even people talking about like a family living in a house or apartment and somebody coming over and having sex with one of the children often to pay the rent. That is a sex act. That is human sex trafficking. It's not just people having sex or fellatio happening or stripping happening. Like it's multiple different acts of sex and in trade of a service. And so I think that's a part of some of this education and awareness that we have to be vigilant about talking about with people in the world and in society, to not be afraid anymore, so that everybody is understanding, so that especially in the younger generations, because they get caught up in so much, especially online, with the pictures and the sextortion and the sexting, it can take a dark turn at any.
Well, now that we've got AI running rampant, I mean, take just a regular clothes picture and turn it into a whole nother thing that these traffickers use to extort people who didn't even do anything wrong. But they may have everybody is going to believe it's you because that's what I'm going to tell them. Yeah. And then what? I mean, and it's hard for any teenager that's going through those teenage years. It's an emotional turmoil mess as it is. So then you
going through puberty and all of the hormonal changes is already hard already. Yeah. And already the social structure of the teenage years is already hard already. Going from I'm a child to, oh my goodness, I'm becoming a teenager. And there's these atmospheric changes, demographic, cultural changes. Who am I going to be in society changes? And then in this day and age, the technology and this pressure that our children face in the world of social media and technology, it's just wild. And AI, I love this video that actually I think an AI platform did to show what can happen in the wrong hands of somebody. I played it on my Instagram, but it's a little girl in a movie theater and she's talking to her parents and she's like, "Hey, mom and dad, this is me." But it's her, AI version of her as she's older. And it's showing how AI can take a baby image of somebody and transition them to a 9-year-old person and then to a teenager and then to an adult. And they can take your voice and they can make your voice make a false call or make a false arrest, make it seem like you're stealing money that you're not stealing. I went to jail for this and I didn't do it, but AI did it. Or I ended up doing this, or or my naked body was on the internet, but it really wasn't my naked body. It was just my face. And so it explains AI in the wrong hands so perfectly. I don't know if parents really get it yet of some of the stuff that can happen, because even when I talk about to some people, when I was talking about, because, in the human sex trafficking classes, we learn about child sex crimes. Okay. And people need to understand that child sex crimes, pornography, child sex crime material, like it's not just a picture of a naked kid. There are grown people out there taking naked pictures of babies and doing horrible things to it. And they get off on that. And that's making money for people. And when I would tell people this, some people look at me like I'm baffling them, like it's craziness. And I'm like, no, like you could have a newborn baby picture and that to somebody is going to get somebody off.
And I've heard stories of an advocate talking about like umbilical cords still attached.
Yes.
People.
Yeah.
Like there are some sick fucks out there.
Yes, everywhere. There are. Yeah. And the thing is like, that's real. And I don't think enough people understand that that's the level at what it goes is our precious newborn innocent children are the victims of these perpetrators even. And people need to realize that, okay, like we're not playing around. We're not joking. Like it's real, it's real. And this is why we can't stay silent. We can't stay silent. And we have to break the culture norm. We have to break these generational cycles. We have to talk about it. We have to advocate for it. And we have to stand up against the grain. We have to stand up against the grain.
Absolutely. I agree. It's always so wonderful having you join me. What a great conversation. I knew we were going to have a great show.
Okay, I'm so glad. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I was like, all right, I'm going to offer education. I'm going to offer some, personal experience, and we're going to fight the good fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Information is power. And you can't change what you can't acknowledge. So for people who don't know what's going on, they can't fix something they don't know. So it's important to have these shows where we do inform and educate and help people learn about what's really happening and what they can do to help too.
Yeah. So I'll send you the resources out there. I'll send those to you and we'll get that going. So people can do it. People can look into it and they can ask us questions. We'll direct them to the people.
I'll stick it all in the description down below. So if anybody is looking for some links and some more information, check the description and we're going to hook you up.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. All right. We'll be in touch.
Wonderful to see you. Absolutely. We'll talk again soon.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye.